The city lay beneath a heavy blanket of night, streets slick with rain that reflected the chaotic neon glow of signs flickering like warnings in the storm. Towering over the cityscape were two skyscrapers, symbols of power and fear, the black serpents on one side, the crimson wolves on the other. For as long as anyone could remember, these two mafia families had been locked in a deadly struggle for dominance, their rivalry steeped in blood, betrayal, and old grudges that refused to fade. Inside the Black Serpent's penthouse, Jungkook sat at the head of a long, polished table. His features were sharp, eyes dark and unreadable, but his presence commanded the room. Around him, the oldest and most trusted advisors of the family spoke in hushed, tense voices. At only 24, Jungkook had already carved out a reputation as a ruthless and brilliant leader. Tonight's meeting was unlike any other. The future of their families hung in a precarious balance. The Crimson Wolves have grown bolder, Jungkook's father said, voice heavy with fatigue. Our territory shrinks with every passing day. If this continues, there will be nothing left for us. Jungkook's gaze swept the room, cold and calculating. We cannot fight forever. The war will destroy us all if it goes on. An older advisor spoke cautiously. A truce has been suggested. But how do we trust them after all the bloodshed? Jungkook's jaw tightened. There is only one way to guarantee peace, a union sealed by blood. A marriage alliance. Across the city, in the heart of the Crimson Wolves' stronghold, Taeyoung was restless. His movements were fluid, almost predatory, pacing a lavish room filled with relics of their power. Charismatic and unpredictable, Taeyoung was the soul of the wolves, a leader who ruled with passion and fierce loyalty. Yet tonight, even his usual confidence was tinged with frustration. His mother, the matriarch of the Crimson Wolves, stood beside him, her expression grave. The Black Serpents have taken too much from us. But if we do not act, we will lose everything. Taeyoung's eyes narrowed. A marriage? To Jungkook? That snake? It feels like a trap. She placed a firm hand on his shoulder. It is the only way to stop the fighting. The families will have to accept it. When the emissaries from both families gathered in a neutral, heavily guarded location, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The air crackled with years of hatred and suspicion. Yet behind closed doors, the elders hammered out a deal. Jungkook and Taeyoung would be forced to marry, their union the key to ending a war that had cost too many lives. The announcement sent shockwaves through both clans. Outrage echoed in the halls of the Black Serpents and the Crimson Wolves alike. The younger members whispered of rebellion. The older ones feared a loss of honor. Jungkook and Taeyoung met for the first time in a stark, cold room lined with steel and shadows, overseen by the law to ensure nothing violent erupted. Their eyes locked, Jungkook steady and commanding, Taeyoung's blazing with defiance. You don't get to decide my fate. Taeyoung spat, his voice low and fierce, hands clenched tightly at his sides. Jungkook's lips curled into a smirk, sharp and unyielding. I don't decide. Our families do. But I promise you this, I'll make you wish you never crossed me. The handshake that sealed their fate was cold and unwelcoming. Neither believed this was the end of their conflict. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new kind of battlefield, one fought not with guns and knives, but with power, pride, and the fragile ties of forced loyalty. Later that night, Jungkook stood alone on the balcony of the Black Serpent's penthouse, rain washing over him like a cleansing storm. His thoughts were heavy. A lifetime tied to the enemy was a bitter pill to swallow. Yet beneath his anger and pride, a flicker of curiosity stirred. Could this alliance be wielded as a weapon? Or would it be his undoing? On the other side of the city, Taeyoung gazed out over the city lights from his own window. His heart raced with conflicting emotions, fury at being forced into this marriage, but also a strange, unspoken question. Could the man he despised most become his greatest ally? Or was this just another chain around his freedom? As the city slept, the two young men prepared for the storm to come. Bound by blood, duty, and a future neither wanted, their lives were now intertwined in a dangerous dance. And the world around them waited with bated breath to see which would break first, the rivalry or the walls around their hearts. The dawn broke over the city with a pale, gray light that felt as heavy as the silence in the Black Serpent's mansion. Jungkook awoke in a room that no longer felt like just his own, a room he now shared, unwillingly, with the leader of his greatest enemy. The realization settled like a weight on his chest. This forced marriage was no mere arrangement. It was a cage. Across town, Taeyoung stared at the ceiling of his new quarters in the Crimson Wolves mansion, his mind racing. The walls echoed with memories of battles fought and lost, of family dinners turned into strategic meetings. But now, those memories felt distant, replaced by the new, uncomfortable reality of sharing his life with Jungkook, the man he was supposed to hate, but who had become an unavoidable presence. Their first day together was a battlefield of its own. The mansion's grand dining room, filled with watchful eyes from both families, was the arena. Jungkook sat at the head of the long table, posture rigid, every movement controlled and deliberate. Taeyoung took the seat beside him, radiating a quiet defiance that challenged the delicate peace in the room. The conversation was terse and formal, laced with undercurrents of rivalry. Each word was a test, each glance a silent challenge. "You seem uncomfortable," Jungkook said smoothly, breaking the silence, eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and warning. Taeyoung's laugh was low, a spark of rebellion. "Maybe because I'm stuck here with my enemy." Jungkook leaned closer, voice a dangerous whisper. "Enemy, partner, husband, the lines are about to blur. Best you remember who holds the power." Taeyoung's eyes flashed with fire. "Power isn't given. It's taken." Days turned into weeks, and the mansion became a stage for their ongoing war. Jungkook, with his calculated precision, sought control in every corner. Taeyoung, unpredictable and bold, resisted at every turn. Their arguments echoed through the halls over trivial things and over the weight of their forced union, yet beneath the surface, cracks began to appear. There were moments when Taeyoung caught Jungkook watching him with a flicker of something unreadable curiosity, respect, and when Jungkook stumbled once, revealing a vulnerability he quickly masked, Taeyoung noticed. One evening, a sudden loud crash echoed from the study. Taeyoung found Jungkook struggling with a locked drawer, frustration evident in his clenched fists. Instead of mocking, Taeyoung stepped forward and helped him open it. "Not so untouchable after all," Taeyoung teased, a rare smile breaking his usual mask. Jungkook's response was a grudging nod, a silent acknowledgement that beneath their rivalry, they were more alike than they cared to admit. But peace was a fragile thing. The family's watchers were everywhere, suspicious of any softness between the two. Rumors began to swirl, whispers of collusion, of secret meetings beyond the prying eyes of the elders. Every small act of cooperation was scrutinized, every quiet moment a potential threat to the fragile truce. The tension escalated when an outside enemy, a rising gang aiming to exploit the fragile peace, attacked one of the Crimson Wolves' safe houses. The attack was swift and brutal, a stark reminder that the war was far from over. Forced to act quickly, Jungkook and Taeyoung put aside their animosity. Their combined strength and strategy turned the tide, their partnership sparking a new, unexpected power that neither had anticipated. After the battle, as they stood amidst the quiet ruins of the safe house, their eyes met no longer just rivals, but allies in a world that demanded unity. This was the beginning of something neither had expected. A partnership forged in fire, with challenges still ahead, but a new path opening before them. The days following the attack on the Crimson Wolves' safe house were unlike any Jungkook or Taeyoung had faced before. The city seemed to hold its breath, caught in the fragile web woven by their forced union and the uneasy peace it promised. But beneath the surface, old wounds festered, and new challenges threatened to break the fragile alliance. Jungkook returned to the Black Serpent's headquarters with a mind racing. The victory against their common enemy had shown him something unexpected strength in cooperation. But admitting that was a dangerous vulnerability. To his family, he was the unyielding leader, the cold strategist who never showed weakness. To Taeyoung, he was a rival, a man he both despised and couldn't help but respect. In the quiet of his office, Jungkook pored over maps and reports, but his thoughts kept drifting back to Taeyoung. There was something about the way Taeyoung had fought beside him, fierce, unrelenting, and yet strangely protective. It unsettled him. Could this forced marriage be more than a political move? Could it become something real? Meanwhile, Taeyoung faced his own turmoil. The Crimson Wolves had suffered losses, and their people looked to him for strength. Yet, the man he was supposed to hate was becoming a reluctant partner. He found himself watching Jungkook not with a fire of enmity, but with a cautious curiosity. There were moments when Jungkook's usual armor slipped, revealing glimpses of the man beneath the legend, a man burdened by expectations, haunted by the weight of his legacy. Their interactions, once explosive and sharp, began to soften, though neither dared to admit it. In the grand halls of the mansion, their conversations stretched longer, touching on strategy, family, and the precarious future. Despite themselves, they began to share pieces of their lives, the dreams lost to duty, the fears hidden behind bravado. One evening, as a storm raged outside, the two found themselves alone in the study. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Jungkook broke the silence first. "You fight well," he said quietly, eyes meeting Taeyoung's across the room. Taeyoung smirked, but there was no mockery in his voice. "I learned from the best." The tension between them shifted, a delicate thread weaving through the space. For a moment, the rivalry faded, replaced by something fragile and new. But the world outside was unforgiving. Rumors of their growing closeness reached the ears of the elders, whispers that threatened to undo the truce. Some saw it as a betrayal, others as a dangerous weakness. The families were watching, waiting for any sign of faltering. Pressure mounted from every side. The Black Serpents demanded results, control, and loyalty. The Crimson Wolves demanded strength, honor, and vigilance. Jungkook and Taeyoung found themselves pulled in opposite directions, caught between the expectations of their bloodlines and the uncertain path they were forging together. In the midst of this turmoil, an unexpected visit changed everything. A mutual acquaintance from a neutral faction approached them with urgent news. A new player was emerging in the underworld, threatening to seize the chaos for their gain. This rising force was ruthless, well-armed, and willing to exploit any cracks in their alliance. Jungkook and Taeyoung realized that their marriage was no longer just a political tool. It was their last defense against annihilation. Forced to put aside suspicion, they devised a plan that required absolute trust, a rarity between them. Late into the night, they strategized, blending Jungkook's precision with Taeyoung's bold creativity. The hours passed unnoticed as they discovered the power of unity, but trust was a fragile thing, and old habits died hard. When a mission went awry due to a miscommunication, blame was cast like a dagger. Words were exchanged, sharp and raw, revealing the deep-seated fears each harbored. Jungkook feared losing control, of being overshadowed. Taeyoung feared betrayal, of becoming a pawn. Yet even in their anger, they found the strength to forgive, not because it was easy, but because they needed each other. As the new threat loomed closer, the cracks in their armor began to heal. Their forced marriage, once a symbol of division, started to become a fortress. Behind the walls of rivalry, something unexpected was growing, a bond forged in struggle, respect, and the unspoken hope of something more. And so, with the city's fate hanging in the balance, Jungkook and Taeyoung prepared to face the storm together. The weeks that followed the uneasy truce were some of the most tumultuous in both Jungkook's and Taeyoung's lives. Bound by a marriage neither wanted, forced into a partnership forged from hate and necessity, they were forced to navigate the razor-thin line between enemies and allies. The mansion they now shared became a crucible where old wounds were reopened and new bonds tentatively formed. Every day was a challenge. The families watched their every move, expecting either betrayal or failure. Their advisors whispered behind closed doors, skeptical of any softness between the two young men. Yet, despite the weight of expectation, Jungkook and Taeyoung found moments of unexpected connection. One chilly morning, Jungkook woke earlier than usual. The mansion was still draped in the quiet of dawn as he found himself wandering into the expansive garden. The city beyond was just beginning to stir, the first rays of sunlight casting long shadows on the dew-covered grass. To his surprise, Taeyoung was already there, sitting beneath the ancient oak tree that stood like a silent guardian over the estate. His gaze was distant, lost in thought. Jungkook approached cautiously, unsure if he was welcome. But Taeyoung looked up, a faint smile touching his lips. "Didn't expect to see you here." Jungkook shrugged, sliding down beside him. "Sometimes it's easier to breathe out here." For a long moment, they sat in silence, the space between them filled not with hostility, but a fragile peace. Taeyoung broke the quiet. "You know, I never thought I'd find myself married to my enemy. It feels like a prison." Jungkook's eyes softened, the usual mask of steel slipping just enough to reveal the burden beneath. "I know. I feel the same. But maybe it's not the chains that bind us, but the choices we make within them." Taeyoung turned to look at him, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "What choices?" Jungkook's voice was low, almost a whisper. "To fight or to forgive? To hate or to understand?" That morning marked a subtle shift, a crack in the walls they'd built around themselves. They began to share more than just the burden of their forced union. They shared pieces of their past, their fears, their hopes. Jungkook spoke of the pressure to live up to his family's legacy, the loneliness of leadership. Taeyoung revealed the pain of watching those he loved suffer in the crossfire of their feud. Their conversations grew longer, extending into the quiet hours of the night. They found solace in each other's company, a rare refuge in a world filled with danger and distrust. One evening, during a rare moment of calm, Jungkook invited Taeyoung to the mansion's rooftop. The city sprawled beneath them, lights twinkling like stars fallen to earth. They talked about everything, dreams they had abandoned, mistakes they wished to undo, and the strange, unexpected connection forming between them. "I never imagined this," Taeyoung admitted, his voice barely audible over the night breeze. "That I'd find someone who understands." Jungkook nodded, eyes reflecting the city's glow. Sometimes, the strongest bonds come from the most unlikely places. But even as their respect and understanding deepened, the world outside remained unforgiving. Their families grew restless, uneasy with the changes they sensed. Rumors spread like wildfire, and whispers of rebellion stirred in the shadows. The fragile peace was tested when a trusted advisor betrayed them, leaking information to their enemies. A sudden attack on their stronghold forced Jungkook and Taeyoung to fight side by side once more, their combined strength and strategy turning the tide. In the aftermath, as they stood amidst the ruins, their hands found each other's, a silent promise forged in the heat of battle. Their partnership was no longer just a political alliance. It was becoming something real, something powerful. Yet, they both knew the road ahead was fraught with danger. Trust was hard-won, and every step forward threatened to unravel the fragile bond they had built. But for the first time, Jungkook and Taehyung faced the future not as enemies bound by duty, but as partners bound by respect and the possibility of something more. As dawn broke once again, the city stood witness to a new chapter in their story, one written not in blood, but in the courage to change. The mansion was unusually silent that night, but the air inside was thick with unspoken words and unresolved tension. Outside, the city lights flickered like distant stars, indifferent to the turmoil brewing within the walls. Taehyung sat alone in the grand sitting room, his silhouette outlined by the pale moonlight streaming through the tall windows. His fingers tapped rhythmically against the armrest, a restless beat that betrayed the calm mask he wore. For days now, the forced marriage had been a strange kind of truce between him and Jungkook, a union neither of them had wanted, but both had reluctantly accepted. Yet, beneath the surface, old wounds and deep-seated rivalries simmered dangerously close to boiling over. Taehyung's mind raced through memories of past confrontations, each one a reminder of how much they had lost and how much was still at stake. A sharp creak from the hallway made him turn just as Jungkook entered, his presence filling the room like a storm. Jungkook's usual tough exterior was softened by exhaustion, but his eyes were still sharp, alert, calculating everything in their path. "We can't keep running from this," Jungkook said quietly, closing the distance between them. "Pretending that we're just two strangers forced into a marriage. We're family now, whether we like it or not." Taehyung's laugh was bitter, laced with disbelief. "Family? Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels more like a prison sentence." Jungkook's gaze hardened, but there was a flicker of something else, understanding, maybe, or a reluctant respect. "If you think this is easy for me, you're wrong. Every day I wake up wondering if this alliance will be the end of us." The weight of their shared reality settled between them, thick and suffocating. Neither wanted to admit how much they depended on each other, now not just for power, but for survival. Suddenly, a knock interrupted the fragile moment. The door creaked open, and one of their most trusted aides stepped inside, urgency written across his face. "Sir, there's been unusual activity at the docks. Intel suggests it might be a setup and ambush." Taehyung and Jungkook exchanged a long look, the unspoken agreement clear. Their enemies were testing the limits of their new alliance. There was no room for mistakes, no time for hesitation. Taehyung rose smoothly, his usual flamboyance replaced by a grim determination. "Let's show them what happens when they try to play us against each other." Jungkook nodded sharply, already reaching for his coat. "We fight together. Until the end." As they moved toward the door, the air between them throbbed with a complicated mix of rivalry and reluctant partnership. In this dangerous game of power and loyalty, the line between friend and foe was blurred, and the greatest battle was yet to come, not just against their enemies, but within their own hearts. Outside, the night awaited, dark and full of peril. Inside, two sworn rivals prepared to face the storm side by side. The moon hung low and heavy in the night sky, casting a pale silver light over the sprawling docks where rusted containers stood like silent sentinels. The salty tang of the sea mixed with the metallic scent of danger, and every shadow seemed alive with unseen threats. The city's underbelly was a world apart, a place where lawlessness thrived and survival was the only rule. Taehyung moved with the grace of a predator, his senses heightened by the tension that crackled in the air. Beside him, Jungkook was a pillar of calm strength, his dark eyes scanning the surroundings with cold precision. Neither spoke, words felt useless in this charged silence, but the connection between them was undeniable. They were no longer just rivals bound by a forced marriage. Tonight, they were comrades in a deadly game. Their men followed closely behind, weapons drawn, fingers twitching near triggers, breaths held in anticipation. The faintest sound, a creak of wood, a scuff of a boot could ignite the mayhem that waited just beyond sight. Suddenly, a sharp whistle split the air. From the shadows, figures sprang out, weapons raised, faces twisted with hatred and greed. The enemy had come, and there was no turning back. Gunfire erupted, echoing off the cold metal walls of the containers. Taeyoung dove behind a stack of crates, heart pounding like a drumbeat of war. Bullets ricocheted dangerously close, and the acrid smell of gunpowder filled his nostrils. Jungkook was already in the thick of it, moving like a force of nature, swift, precise, merciless. He dispatched enemies with a lethal efficiency born from years of training and survival. Taeyoung watched, a complicated mix of admiration and reluctant respect stirring in his chest. But the battle was far from over. Taeyoung spotted a shadow slipping behind Jungkook, a figure aiming a knife at his back. Without hesitation, Taeyoung sprang forward, tackling the attacker to the ground. The two men wrestled fiercely, each fighting for dominance, but Taeyoung's desperation fueled his strength. Their eyes met briefly, Taeyoung's dark with fierce determination, the attacker's wild with desperation before he managed to disarm and incapacitate him. Breathing hard, Taeyoung rose and scanned the battlefield. The gunfire had subsided, and the last of the attackers were retreating into the night. Jungkook approached, wiping blood from a gash on his cheek, his expression unreadable. "We survived," Jungkook said quietly, voice hoarse but steady. "For now," Taeyoung replied, a grim smile tugging at his lips. They stood together amidst the scattered debris, the weight of their alliance heavier than ever. The fragile truce they had forged was tested tonight not just by enemies, but by the growing realization that their fates were irrevocably intertwined. As they walked back through the labyrinth of containers toward the safety of their mansion, the silence between them was no longer uncomfortable. It was the silence of warriors who understood that in this world of blood and shadows, a trust was a weapon more powerful than any gun. Back at the mansion, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The servants moved silently, aware that something had shifted between their young masters. The forced marriage that once felt like a cruel joke was now a bond forged in fire. In the dimly lit study, Taeyoung poured a glass of whiskey, his hands still trembling slightly from the adrenaline. Jungkook entered quietly, leaning against the doorframe, watching him with an intensity that made Taeyoung's breath hitch. "You should rest," Jungkook said softly, voice low but firm. Taeyoung shook his head, swirling the amber liquid. "Rest feels like a luxury we can't afford." Jungkook stepped closer, his gaze never leaving Taeyoung's. "We can't keep doing this alone." For a long moment, Taeyoung said nothing, then finally met Jungkook's eyes. "Then don't." The words hung in the air, fragile yet charged with meaning. A promise. A beginning. Outside, the city slept uneasily, unaware that in one mansion, two enemies had become something more, an unbreakable force standing against the storm. Over the days that followed, the mansion became a battleground of a different kind. Taeyoung and Jungkook navigated the complexities of their forced union, each step forward tentative but inevitable. They learned each other's rhythms, their silences and storms, the quiet vulnerabilities beneath the hardened facades. One evening, as rain tapped softly against the windows, they found themselves alone in the library. Taeyoung was reading aloud from a worn book, his voice breaking the stillness. "You never told me you liked poetry," Jungkook teased, a rare smile curving his lips. Taeyoung shrugged, eyes twinkling. "There's more to me than you think." Jungkook closed the distance, his tone serious. "There's a lot I want to know." Their eyes locked, the tension between them electric. The forced marriage was no longer just a political maneuver, it was a slow unraveling. A discovery of something neither had expected to find. And as the rain fell harder outside, washing away the dust of old grudges, a new chapter began, one written not in blood, but in tentative hope. The world outside was ruthless, but inside the mansion, amidst whispered secrets and stolen glances, Taeyoung and Jungkook were learning what it meant to fight not against each other, but together. The shadows still lurked, the dangers still real, but for the first time, they faced them as one. And the night was theirs. The first light of dawn seeped gently through the curtains, casting a warm golden hue across the room. The chaos and violence that had once consumed their lives seemed like a distant nightmare, replaced by a fragile peace that had taken root in the quiet moments between battles. Taeyoung stood by the window, watching the city awaken beneath the soft morning sky. His usual playful facade was softened by a contemplative calm. The mansion, once a battleground of power and pain, now felt like a sanctuary, a place where two rivals had become something far more. From across the room, the soft sound of footsteps caught his attention. Jungkook emerged from the hallway, carrying a small bag, his movements steady and unhurried. His eyes met Taeyoung's with a quiet understanding that words could never fully capture. "We survived everything," Taeyoung said, voice low but filled with something like awe. Jungkook nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "Not just survived. We fought. We learned. We changed." The war between their families had finally ended. The brutal rivalry that had defined their lives was replaced by a tentative truce, brokered not through threats or bloodshed, but through the strength of their alliance and the unexpected bond they had forged. Their men had laid down weapons, the gangs disbanded or merged into a single force, working toward rebuilding rather than destroying. The city itself seemed to breathe easier, the dark clouds of violence lifting to reveal the possibility of something better. Taeyoung turned from the window and walked toward Jungkook, the weight of past grudges melting away in the warmth of this new beginning. He reached out, taking Jungkook's hand with a tenderness that surprised them both. "We don't have to pretend anymore," Jungkook said softly, his voice steady and sure. "No," Taeyoung agreed, his smile genuine. "We don't. I want to build something real with you." The words hung between them like a promise, fragile and beautiful. They sat together, planning their future not as enemies forced into marriage, but as partners choosing a life beyond the shadows of their past. The mansion was no longer a prison, but a home filled with hope. Over time, their relationship deepened, built on trust, respect, and the rare kind of love that can only grow from hardship and understanding. They found laughter in the quiet mornings, comfort in shared silences, and strength in the knowledge that they faced the world as one. Their families, once bitter enemies, came to accept and even celebrate the union that had changed everything. The scars of the past remained, but they no longer defined the future. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of color, Taeyoung and Jungkook stood on the balcony, looking out over the city that had tested them and ultimately shaped their destiny. Jungkook wrapped an arm around Taeyoung's shoulders, pulling him close. "We made it," he murmured. Taeyoung rested his head against Jungkook's chest, heart full. "Together." And as the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, they knew this was just the beginning of their story, a story written not in rivalry or revenge, but in hope, love, and new beginning. The end. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe.